Welcome to another movie plot and enjoy the memories. It begins 200 years after a spacefarer was impregnated with an alien and incinerated. The scientists stationed on the medical research vessel Auriga have successfully cloned Ellen Ripley with blood samples from her time on Earth. Dr. Gediman extracts from her a clone of the alien xenomorph queen and takes it away for research, where it quickly grows into its final form. As an afterthought, the eighth and only living clone of Ripley's repaired and kept alive for further testing. As a result of her DNA mixing with the aliens during the cloning process, she's now able to heal her wounds in days and shows enhanced strength, requiring the ship's crew of 42 soldiers to keep her contained to a cell. The commanding officer, General Perez, questions why the clone seemingly has Ripley's memories, including the distress she feels when being reminded of the child she lost. Chief scientist Dr. Wren attributes it to inherited memories passed down generationally, like the xenomorphs do with their strength, which Getty views as an unexpected benefit as they have the chance for further study. 8 refrains from talking about the events which led to her death, but casually warns Gediman that the Queen will breed again and kill them all. Wren insists that they aren't some greedy corporation like Ripley's former employer Weyland-Yutani, who was bought out years earlier by Walmart. They are instead working for the government, but he gives off obsessive vibes over the survival of the creature, and also eats his pasta like this. Unbeknownst to her, they've tasked a ragtag band of smugglers to kidnap colonists from nearby planets and deliver them as hosts for xenomorph breeding. Captain Elgyn and his romantic love interest Hillard arrive along with 2 other mercenaries and 2 mechanics on board their starship, the Betty. The first mate, Christie, prepares for boarding by hiding pistols up his sleeves, while the less graceful merc Johnner antagonizes the mechanics in the workshop. He teases Vriess for his handicap of being in a wheelchair, so the new recruit Call breaks the Big Oaf's favorite knife. The Betty makes port in the Auriga and the crew depart to make their way through a checkpoint. Christie keeps his hands up during the wand test to clear security, while Vriess's wheelchair sets it off, but there isn't much they can do about it. Johnner's allowed to bring his thermos on board as everyone else silently walks through the metal detector. The crew transfer the 8 prisoners who are kept in stasis sleep to be placed inside chambers with newly laid xenomorph eggs. Meanwhile, the captain's paid handsomely by the general, who questions the smugglers' recent hiring, but he rebuts that Call's handy with a wrench and good on the eyes. It's revealed that Perez has no right to be doing these experiments, as Congress never signed off on it, which is why he's aligned himself with Elgyn and gives the Betty crew 2 days to resupply with whatever they need. They meet number 8, who also exhibits super speed while easily keeping a basketball away from the flirty Johnner. She then sends him flying with a single swipe, revealing herself to be more than human to the Betty crew, who are unable to cause her any harm but a bloody nose. Wren walks in proud of his experiment's performance, but sends her away as Johnner asks what she is. Gediman calls her somewhat of a predator, while just like the alien, her blood's shown to be highly corrosive. Later on, Call begins acting up on Johnner's homebrew and is sent away from the rest of the crew to sleep it off. She uses this alone time and a spray bottle of the general's breath to sneak inside the Auriga's brig and achieve her own agenda. Call's here to eliminate Ripley 8 before she can give birth to the alien, but realizes that the scientists have already extracted it by the scar on number 8's chest. She begs Ripley to help her destroy the Queen before it's too late, but the clone's now talking about the alien like she's its mother and tells Call that they're all going to die. When she discouragingly exits the cell, Call's swiftly arrested by Wren, who suspects that the whole crew's in on it. She insists they had nothing to do with it, but Wren labels them all as terrorists to be executed along with Call, so Elgyn has no choice but to give Christie the signal to open fire. Johnner's thermos transforms into a gun and the mercs easily defeat the entire room of soldiers, including one who gets the drop on Christie, but he ricochets a bullet into the apparent soft spot of his helmet. Meanwhile, the xenomorphs grow up and Gediman spends his time testing their intelligence. When he's startled by the alien's piston-like throat fired at the barrier, he gives it a blast of nitrogen spray, which it quickly learns that it dislikes and doesn't approach the glass ever again. As things are kicking off in the gymnasium, the scientists are distracted watching the cameras and calling security when the aliens get an idea. 2 of the xenomorphs tear a third apart, causing its acidic blood to spill out, melting a hole through the floor. By the time Gediman realizes he's too late to hit the nitrogen, and they escape their confinement. Since there's no barriers between them now anyway, he goes to inspect the room and becomes the first casualty of the outbreak, and when an arriving security guard does the same thing as Xeno's smart enough to activate the nitro, causing him to freeze to death. The creatures quickly take over, so the hairy-backed General Perez orders the evacuation of the ship. Many of the terrified crew abandon ship successfully, while one escapes shuttle slaughtered by an alien stowaway that the general's forced to toss a grenade inside and detonate in space. He salutes his fallen comrades and plans to go down with his ship, but is instantly killed by a little throat-tongue mouth to the back of the head. Ripley's left behind on the Auriga, but before aliens can break down the door to her confinement, she uses her acid blood to short the electronic lock to a second door and escape. The grumpy mercenaries question Call about her mission but are interrupted by screams and decide to take the argument back to Betty. Along the way, Elgyn's covering the rear when he gets lured away from the crew by a fallen gun like a child to candy. Suddenly he's pulled through the grate by a Xeno who quickly tongues out his heart as his devastated crew have no time to save him. Elsewhere, Vriess tries to find his way back to the Betty but gets intercepted by a warrior. The cornered cripple slowly takes pieces of his wheelchair apart which combine into a makeshift shotgun that he fires into the alien. Its blood drips on Vriess's leg, barely being noticed by him at first, until a second lands on the back of his ear, sending the mechanic into a murderous rage. The crew just think that he's dead when the xenomorph returns, cornering them against a locked door, but its head's blown off by Ripley, who rises up through the captain and needs a ride off this boat. Call says not to trust her as she isn't human, but she's not one to talk after her failed assassination. They also join forces with Wren, who they blame for everything, and says that there's still a dozen aliens left, and the last surviving soldier, Private Vincent. Ripley takes out the creature's tongue and hands it to Call as a sarcastic souvenir before they make their way to the Betty. To their surprise, Vriess survives, so he joins them to hear the bad news from Wren. The Auriga's autopilot takes them back to Earth as a safety measure in case of disaster, so Call votes they destroy the ship to save the planet from a xenomorph invasion, but no one else cares and just wants to escape. When they pass a laboratory labeled 1 through 7, number 8 enters to find the 7 failed clones, with some being more fused with the alien DNA than others. The still living 7th begs to be put out of her misery, so Ripley incinerates her along with the entire laboratory. She wants to execute Wren for his part in their creation but relents as Call follows it up with a punch. Next, the group reach the room full of dead colonist hosts and realize that they helped cause this. They encounter a survivor named Purvis who's confused about how he got there and was left alone by the xenomorphs. Ripley can tell there's an alien baby growing inside him and gets into graphic detail about how it'll break his ribcage when it's born. They let him join the group for now, but Christie says that if he makes any twitchy moves he'll just shoot him. When they reach the cooling chamber, Vriess requires piggybacking from Christie as the pipes have overflown. They need to swim through a flooded room where the distressed Hillard falls behind, allowing 2 trailing xenomorphs to ambush her. Johnner kills one with his launcher, but the second grabs the co-pilot around the ankle and drags her away. The group tries to surface and find themselves briefly trapped under a membrane before bursting through to the Queen's nest. The eggs begin to hatch as a facehugger leaps on Ripley, where if it weren't for her super strength she wouldn't be able to tear it off. Ricochet Christie fires grenades into the nest and destroys the rest of the hatching huggers, allowing the group to surface in a xeno-free zone. They climb up an elevator shaft to escape the returning alien warrior, but Wren tricks Call into giving him her weapon, then inevitably betrays them, shooting her. As her lifeless body falls into the water below, Wren makes for Betty by himself and seals the door behind him. The alien ignores Call and leaps on the ladder to find Christie trailing behind. It slips every bullet and spits a fatal dose of acid in his face, causing him to let go, but Vriess catches the both of them. When the Xeno grabs Christie's foot, preventing the two from moving any further, Johnner assists by dropping back and spraying until a single shot lands to the brain, blowing the alien apart. The creature's heavy carcass still weighs on Vriess's arms, so Christie uses his last bit of strength to cut their binds and sacrifice himself. When the survivors reach the locked door at the top of the elevator shaft, Call opens it from the other side, saving the group and revealing herself to be an advanced model android. She's been living in hiding after her kind were all outlawed and learned about Ripley from hacking into the computers. The crew coerce her to interface with the ship's mainframe, but she doesn't like to do it as it reminds her that she isn't human. She finds a way back to Betty and also programs the Auriga to fly full speed into a remote part of Earth to prevent the xenomorphs from surviving. Then locks Wren out of escaping and turns on the vessel for her crew to make a quick dash for Betty. They halt for a moment when Johnner threatens Call for reducing their time by reprogramming the ship's speed. But Ripley sticks her hand in his mouth and offers to collect another souvenir. Suddenly Ripley can sense they're standing over the Queen's nest when the grate's pulled out from beneath her feet. Everyone else just continues on to the Betty, assuming that she died when seeing the biomatter absorb the clone. Once they reach the ship, they make the preparations to depart, when Wren shoots Purvis and takes Call hostage. Before he has a chance to hijack the ship, the chestburster begins sending Purvis into a crazed state, where he walks through Wren's bullets and knocks him down. He then puts the doctor's head to his chest and lets the alien burst through the both of them before the crew finish them off. Meanwhile, Ripley's taken by one of the warriors to the Queen's chamber deep in the nest, where Gediman's still alive and attached to the wall. He explains to number 8 that the mixing of their DNA has given the Queen a womb which she uses to give birth to an offspring without the need for an egg. It bears a resemblance to a human skull with sunken eyes, and brutally rips the face off the xenomorph queen as it thinks Ripley ate its mother. When it turns to bite the top off Gediman's head, Ripley uses this moment to climb out of the nest and sprints back to the Betty. She just manages to leap on board before it departs the bay and takes control of the ship as she's the best pilot. Realizing the bay is still open, Call goes to secure it, when the hybrid sneaks on board and closes it behind her. The petite android manages to fit her body into a space where the newborn's unable to reach, until Vincent enters to check on the commotion and the alien instantly pops his head like a pimple. It drags Call out of her hiding spot, so Ripley goes back to confront her grandchild. It's instantly calmed by her presence, not noticing Ripley use her own blood to breach a hole in the window of Betty. The suction causes the newborn to be ripped through the hull and into the vacuum of space as number 8 and Call hold on. Ripley watches saddened as the look of betrayal on the alien's face turns into it screaming an audible no, before all that's left of it's the familiar skull to be broken down further. The Auriga slams into Earth, killing all of the remaining xenomorphs as the Betty begins to burn up on atmospheric re-entry. They manage to just survive and soar through the clouds before landing on the once beautiful planet. Johnner and Vriess both survived while number 8 and Call depart to a planet that neither's ever set foot on before. They plan to make themselves scarce before the government arrive while looking out over the ruins of Paris. And the movie ends.